Joining the conversation, now joined by Rula Jebreal. She is a foreign policy analyst, political commentary. Her commentaries have appeared, by the way, in the New York Times, the Daily Beast, Salon, and Newsweek, among others. She joins us from Palm Springs. We've just heard the Congresswoman talking about not letting in the refugees. What do you think, Rula?
Look, we have a process that's put in place by this government and by every national security agency, and they've been vetting over and again every refugees. I think the Congresswoman is not only misguided, but they are playing with politics. For them, refugees is another theme to basically promote an idea of an America that is segregated, excluded. There's not one wall big enough to keep out ideas and ideologies, or internet or globalization. It doesn't work. If you talk to serious analysts and serious national security advisors, they will tell you that the attackers in Paris, in the UK, they are European citizens. They have a European passport. They don't even speak Arabic, and they never read probably the Quran. For them, it's a political ideology, and that's what you need to tackle. So to exclude refugees, the people who are running away from a butcher in Syria or in Iraq, doesn't speak highly of American values. America was built on immigration. Every ancestor, every founder of this country was an immigrant. And people ran away from religious persecution, racial persecution, and now we have Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and some people in Congress thinking that this is a solution and this is an idea.
But Rula,
it's just simply, we will end up walling ourselves inside and excluding the rest of the world.
Rula, we do, though, have logical fear, do we not? That was not around years ago. Fears of terrorism, that wasn't a word you heard 20 years ago. Fear when you see Belgium and San Bernardino and Paris. So we may disagree with what the Congresswoman said, but we understand the fear, don't we?
There's a logical fear, and it's a legitimate fear of people who are trying to understand what's going on and what's happening around the world. But fear is not an American value. Hope is. And what I'm trying to say is, look at what worked. It's not ideological difference. It's actually about practical solutions. In these last 14 years of war on terror, let's look at successful examples. The United States was in Iraq for 3 years before they captured #1 of Al-Qaeda. They raided every city, every town, every neighborhood, almost 20 times every night for 3 years. They could not capture Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, #1 of Al-Qaeda. They start having serious intel about Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the guy that Al-Qaeda itself called a butcher and actually thought that he was too violent for their standards. They captured him when they cut a deal with the Sunni tribes, and that was the beginning of the awakening. It was an American awakening and an Iraqi awakening, and it was a period of collaboration and cooperation with the Sunni minority, and that led to capture and killing of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. That is the mindset that works. So our Muslim community in the US should never be a target, because they are absolutely the first response and the first defense against radicalization. These are the people that actually inform and tell you if there's somebody or suspect activity. But what Ted Cruz and Trump and some people in Congress, unfortunately, are talking about, they're talking about humiliation and occupation of our own citizen. That does not work and will lead to more radicalization.
Does it bother you that they have apparently reached a mass appeal? Cruz and Trump combined are appealing to millions of Americans. Does that bother you?
More than bother me, it concerns me. I've seen this phenomena before, Larry. I lived in Europe and I lived in the Middle East. What they are endorsing, what they are advocating, is to turn the United States into one of these police states that oppress its own people and pave the way for radicalization. Egypt, our ally, produced Ayman Zawahiri, #1 of Al-Qaeda, mass radicals, and the brain of every political Islamist, and that was Sayyid Qutb. Our another ally, police state, Saudi Arabia, produced 15 of the 19 hijackers and bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, basically. So we're looking at that model, and this is what we want to export. it concerns me for the future of America, but I have faith actually that American people who are on the forefront of this technological, incredible revolution that is created a borderless communication system can reach to the rest of the world, and together we can defeat the monster. We need to empower the body so the body can defeat and fight better cancer cells. And we can do this together as one nation, not as a divided nation.
How about the concept of Muslims, the good Muslims, doing more in this fight, speaking out more? It affects them a great deal, doesn't it?
It affects all of us, Larry. I think American Muslims view themselves first and foremost as citizens, as American citizens. Some people want them to be viewed only as Muslims. But if you look at the data, and the United States Defense Department and Minister of Defense released some of the data, we have thousands of law enforcement in the CIA, FBI, in the police departments all over the country who are Muslim. People who probably, when Ted Cruz or Donald Trump are in New York, probably they are his details, security details. So when you single out one community because there's a fraction of criminality, is this what we rejected in this country? I mean, if we look at what this country did to African American community, we have 2 million African American men sitting in jail because of basically institutionalized racism. But now somebody wants to extend that to other communities, whether it's Latinos or Muslims. It's time to stand together against bigotry and racism, and also together against extremism. But it's already happening. If you look, Larry, at who is, for example, the Christmas bomber, the guy that wanted to wage war and took a flight from Amsterdam to blow himself up in the United States. Who reported about him? Was his father. His father, who was the head of the Nigerian Central Bank, called the FBI and told them that his son was about to carry a terrorist attacks. We need to empower these communities so eventually they can be open enough, and I believe in the system, so they can report about what's happening inside the communities.
How do you assess the job that President Obama is doing vis-a-vis ISIS?
Look, President Obama has been looking at reality in a very realistic way. But let me, Larry, report to you, I just tell you that I was one of the few people who covered the Middle East for the last 15 years since this war on terror started. And the United States did terrible mistakes. And if you look at a country like Iraq, a secular, basically, country led by a tyrant dictator, Saddam Hussein, we invaded a non-sequitur country for a non-existential threat. Iraq today is a threat to the United States because of that invasion. It radicalized a generation of people, and it produced what we call today and what we see ISIS. And ISIS is not only in Iraq or Syria, it's today in Libya, in Yemen, and probably elsewhere, and in Africa. President Obama is trying, and he tried to build a coalition of people and tell these minorities and majorities in the Arab Muslim world, especially the Saudis, and that's why they are angry with him, that it's their own problem. They need to solve it firsthand. They created the monster, and they need to take that monster out. But Saudi Arabia is too busy killing the Shiites in Yemen and elsewhere that they're not even looking at the monster as if it's monster. What concerns me also, our allies in Israel, who look at the Shiites as the major enemy, when actually ISIS and every radical group is Sunni, and for them it's not a liability. It's not a bigger of a threat. Turkey is playing another game, and Jordan another game. We need to be aware of the geopolitical games of these allies and actually call them out on it.
Rula, as you explain all of this, do you have any optimism?
Absolutely, yes. Look, I believe the arch of history is long, goes forward, backwards, and sideways, but it always bends toward justice. Larry, 60 years ago, there was fascism, Nazism, millions of European citizens, because they were Jews, were killed. Today, you look at Europe, yes, they have problems, but they have democracy. They have freedom of religion. They have prosperity. If you would have asked any European citizen in the 30s that question, probably the answer would have been no.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, the answer always should be about optimism. And I believe the United States will thrive and succeed.
Rula, you're a great guest. Hope to meet you someday soon in person. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Me too, Larry.
Rula Jebreal, political commentator and foreign policy analyst.